And I think other folks will join in a few minutes. Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this Rules Committee meeting to order. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call.
Mr. Rivera.
Present.
Ms. Quinn Davidson.
Here.
Ms. Allard.
Here.
Mr. Constant. Mr. Dunbar.
Here.
Ms. Kennedy.
Here.
Ms. LaFrance.
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia. Mr. Peterson. Mr. Weddleton.
Here.
Ms. Zolotel.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I have arrived, Mr. Constant.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So as usual, if you want to get in the queue, please, members, put yourself in the chat or text me if you can't get to the chat. Also, per the MO that I run these meetings, this should be informal in nature. So I'm going to stop saying Mr. Constant and I'm going to start saying Chris. I'm going to start with report from the Assembly Chair and the Municipal Clerk. So I'll go ahead and start. So just a general comment, just in case anyone needs to hear this. Just want to acknowledge that we are doing some pretty amazing work right now that is truly helping our constituents. And so we absolutely have areas to explore and improve in, and I look forward to doing that. But that shouldn't detract from the good work that we are doing. So I really want to thank everyone for your efforts, including the amazing clerk's office and our Assembly Counsel, Dean Gates, who are putting in above and beyond efforts to assist us in our goals. Speaking of goals, next topic on my Assembly Chair's report is leadership goals. So as I reported in June, the quarterly comprehensive update of our 2019-2021 Assembly priorities continues to be behind schedule. We're going to work on getting this done ASAP with review of the Assembly at some point in a special Rules Committee meeting. For me, I really want to get this out to the community so that they can see where we are, what progress we have made or haven't made, because we're going to be totally transparent about it, in our various goals. Next, moving on to the alcohol tax town halls. So the planning is going really well for these town halls. The discussion we have later today at the work session is going to inform the flow of the town hall, but a general agenda has been developed and we have a test run of the town hall scheduled for this upcoming Monday. Media and public outreach are going to begin next week as well. A big thanks to Desiree for working through all of the technical issues. Next, regarding the I Can't Breathe resolution, I met with the clerk earlier this month, feels like forever ago, to walk through how we might implement the various calls to action outlined in the resolution, and I hope to be able to share more concrete information soon. Appreciate the clerk's energy in helping organize a lot of that. Next is the Ombudsman's office. The remodel is 100% complete. I haven't been through the office, but I invite all of you to visit their office at some point. A meeting is scheduled for Monday to discuss next steps for the Assembly office remodels, and I'll keep the members in the loop as things progress. Communications and elections, so follow up to the discussion that we had that I previewed last month. Due to COVID-19, there was a savings of approximately $150,000 from elections. Assembly leadership met with the communication subcommittee earlier in the month, I think, to discuss our proposal and ideas. A scope of work is being developed, and after receiving and reviewing a recommendation from the clerk's office, we will either go with an existing contract with Northwest Strategies to do the work, which would save significant time, or we'll go through a formal RFP process. That is TBD. The draft scope of work will likely focus on two areas, just based on the conversation we had with the communications subcommittee. Communications around homelessness, which is something we've talked about for years, and improvements to the Assembly website, also something we've talked about for a long time. Next is improvements to phone testimony. So just based on the last sort of week and a half, I've talked with the clerk about a variety of improvements that we can make to the phone testimony system. Some of these might take a little bit to roll out, but you should start seeing changes hopefully in the coming week, if not weeks. That is all for my Assembly Chair's report. I guess before I turn it over to, okay. So before I turn it over to Barbara for the Municipal Clerk's report, are there anything else members would like me to report on or any questions?
Felix, Chris is just asking Shooty if you could scroll the agenda up so people can see kind of what's to come. Thanks.
Hey, Felix, it's Suzanne.
Hey, Suzanne.
Hey, could you review the dates for the alcohol tax town halls again?
Sure. So the dates are, and yeah, everyone should have invites, but they are August 4th and 6th.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. All right, not hearing anything else, I'll turn it over to Barbara for the Municipal Clerk report.
Okay, I have 3 things I'm going to report on, and they are probably the same 3 things that I reported to you last time about. The first is agenda evolution. We are proceeding with agenda evolution. It is complicated. It's different for us. It's an upgrade from the current system that we have, but we are working really, really hard to make sure that it looks as transparent as possible to the Assembly, to the public, and also I think that our administration users have it a little bit easier. So everybody is in the agenda team, you know, which is me, Jennifer, Carissa, Heidi, and Travis. We're spending every bit of our spare time on that. So Carissa and some of us have even worked a couple of weekends exclusively to make sure that we're ready. We're going to be scheduling some training for the Assembly members. And most of you have responded to me, and I'll send you an invitation for that. We go live at your meeting on August 11th. So again, that's coming up pretty quick. The second topic that I'd like to talk to you about is similar. It concerns the public portal where we're going to make Assembly documents that are currently on what is called the G Drive, available to the public. We had a meeting this week with OIT to discuss some solutions to that project and outline what needs to be done. Mr. Constant, or I should say Chris Constant, is a part of that team, and I think we thought it was a really productive meeting. The third thing that I want to talk to you about is the concept of task-based teams that we've created in the clerk's office, and we're really pretty excited about those task-based teams. You know, we really are a team of teams, to borrow, I believe it is Admiral McChrystal is the one that wrote the book on Team of Teams. And, you know, we have the agenda team, we have the elections team, we have a couple of other functional teams in the clerk's office. But there's so much other work to do that doesn't really fit your functional team and really includes people from all teams. So these task-based teams, we started with a web editing team, and that one is going very well. And then we've kicked off a social media team, and I hope you've noticed our social media has just skyrocketed in the last month since we have this new social media team. That's Travis, Kiana, Jennifer, and I. The a couple of the other teams, we have a communications team, we have an assembly committee team. And that's really nice that we have staff that are making sure that the committee chairs are getting consistent information, getting the guidance from the chair, and that we're doing that consistently instead of inconsistently, because everybody staffs committees. And I think the most important thing for the assembly about the task-based teams is to remember that this is developing leadership within the clerk's office. And I'm really proud of the way our staff is all stepping up into leadership roles to be a team lead for those different task-based teams. And it also allows them to be creative. And I am just blown away with the creativity that's coming out of these task-based teams. So you'll continue to hear more about that. And those are my 3 updates.
Thanks, Barbara. Any questions for Barbara? Okay, not seeing any, we're going to move on to the assembly priorities part of the discussion, of the agenda rather. So just a general discussion around the 2021 Assembly Budget Priorities Memo. So due to the COVID-19 Relief Fund discussions, work has really stalled on the 2021 Assembly Budget Priorities Memo. We are already 4 days behind the preferred date of the administration to receive this memo, which was July 20th. For my part, Austin, Suzanne, and I did develop what was a good process to get this work done. But somehow COVID-19 relief, the alcohol tax, and the 2021 budget turned into this 3-headed hydra that I could not figure out how to untangle. I still think it would be of great benefit for us to send something to the administration. Otherwise, it may mean a much more extensive budget amendment process in November. So I'd like to open this up to discussion and see if members have ideas specific to us getting the 2021 Assembly Budget Priorities Memo done, which Assembly leadership can run with. So open it up to discussion if anyone has ideas, because I need some, please.
Felix, this is Meg. I have an idea. I was just going to type it, but I thought I could just mention it faster.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is there any way to somehow wrap part of this discussion into the other discussions on the other budgets? And the reason I raise that is we're really trying to be very holistic as we look at CARES and alcohol tax funding, so that maybe the end product from those discussions gets us where we need to go with this discussion, or getting these priorities put, together for the memo. Because I feel like they're all working in concert, and that there's a little bit, at least on my part, a little bit of hesitancy as we watch these other things move forward to try to figure out how to balance the 3 different budgeting processes that we're in.
Thanks. Yeah, that's something that came up in the planning discussions that Cameron, Shelley, and I had, and I'm actually going to put Cameron on the spot. Sorry, could you respond to that?
Ooh. Meg, can you repeat the question? I only heard part of it.
Sure, Cameron. I was just asking if there was a way that we could utilize some of our other budget discussions to get to what we need to do with regard to the Assembly Budget Priorities Memo, because for me, at least, there's some hesitancy because I think all 3 of these budgeting processes are really combined or at least very closely related.
And just to add a little bit more to that, so Cameron, we talked about this during the planning meetings for the all-day session. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the I guess I'm going to just spitball this because I'm not really sure how to answer it. So jump in, but I would just say that and when you're talking about budgeting from the different sources, right? You're talking about the different sources of funds coming in. Or are you talking about the larger, like, budgeting process for our entire budget? I guess I want to be clear on what I'm responding to. We're planning. We're talking about. Are we talking about the meeting that we're thinking about on the 31st, Felix?
Yeah, I guess that's a good question for Meg. So is that what you're looking for, Meg, to wrap this into the meeting of the 31st?
That, and yeah, or just making it a piece that we can talk about our 2021 Assembly budget priorities as we talk about the alcohol tax and the CARES Act funding, because it's all interrelated.
Yeah. I would just say, I mean, that it's a complex challenge because I think that there's an interest in both creating a framework that makes sense for allocating and investing funds of specifically the CARES Act funds, and but that framework really, as Forrest and others mentioned, relates to the broader work of our investments, both from other sources related to COVID-19 and care and alcohol tax, but it also relates broader to our priorities as a city. And so the challenge is trying to figure out how to make specific decisions about certain pots of money, and to do that in a thoughtful way, but not lose the fact that it's, as you say, it's all interrelated. And I think one of our goals for the meeting coming up on the 31st is to do just that, is to both try to make some specific decisions about that particular pot, but then have a broader conversation about how that relates to other sources of funds and the budget in general. And so I think, to the degree that we can do both of those things, I think we would like to.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to mention this later, but Cameron and I are going to be meeting with Shelley Monday or Tuesday to finalize the agenda. So this is good feedback for us when we meet with Shelley. So outside of the suggestion that Meg has brought up of trying to incorporate this into the 31st meeting on the 31st, are there any other ideas?
I'll just say, Felix, this is Austin, that I agree with Meg. We kind of talked about that a little bit offline.
Thanks, Austin.
And I'll just share really quick
Felix.
that that I added that to my the alcohol tax stuff for the discussion today already in the spreadsheet I'm providing. So I hope I didn't jump too far ahead, but I did that.
Thanks.
And Felix, is this primarily about the priorities or the budget?
So this is, well, so the priorities memo identifies items that we want the administration to prioritize as they develop the budget. So does that answer your question?
Well, my thoughts aren't on the specifics of what funding we put where, but more so on the top line question of what are those priorities. And
yes,
you're working on a memo, and I think that I learned that communications is not one of these priorities, but instead it imbues every priority. But I'm not sure where that fits into this conversation. It seems like we're running down the budget road more swiftly and probably properly.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah.
And Felix, this is Cameron. I would add that one of the things that for me became apparent, and this is good just in terms of the assembly priorities, are that as I think about strategic priorities and how to develop those, that these priorities are not necessarily on, I would guess, on the same level. And I think this is what you just said, Chris, right? Is that quality of life, public safety, economic development, and communications are not really on the same level. And so that's something for us to think about going down the road, is that when all of us were developing the priorities for the response to COVID-19, we were trying to align them in some ways to our assembly priorities. And so it became clear that that's something we want to probably think about in the future is communications really a priority, or is it a function of something that we need to do within all of them? So anyway, just wanted to share that.
Thanks. And so when I answer a question that Crystal put in the chat, have a response to that comment, and then I'll go to Crystal. So Crystal asked, is the meeting on July 31st noticed yet? No, it is not. I was just emailing Barbara earlier today about that. So it should be noticed ASAP. Then responding to Cameron's comment, yeah, you know, maybe it just wasn't crafted clearly enough, but the record states pretty clearly that communications itself wasn't one of the, what we ended up calling pillar priorities, right? The pillar priorities were quality of life, economic development, public safety, and homelessness. Communications was seen as sort of an overarching feature of all of these. And I haven't gone back to read it in a while, but I'm fairly certain the narrative states that. But I also understand that narrative and legislative intent sometimes isn't directly translated when it comes to the graphic, right? And the graphic has all of these things together. So it doesn't really differentiate. But at least from my perspective, and from everything and all the hours and hours of work that I remember, I think there was a clear sort of differentiation between the two. I'll turn it over to Crystal.
Thanks, Felix. I guess a couple comments, and one, I just want to say that I believe the communications part is just kind of the overriding part that we're always going to have to do, and actually that's becoming more and more important right now when there's just so many things that people are concerned about, worried about. So that's kind of ongoing anyway. But you know, I kind of agree with Cameron that it doesn't really make sense to make it a priority, but essentially it just is by the nature of the beast, so to speak. But one of the other comments I wanted to make was about this idea about prioritizing. I even look at that concept very differently than I would have at this time last year. My concern is that we are in a financial situation in this economy and our community, like everybody else in the rest of the United States, maybe in the rest of the world. But we have to recognize, and what's really coming to the forefront for me all the time is, where are those budget revenue gaps going to be? So my idea of prioritizing right now is not so much what do I want to see extra being done or what do I want to see done differently, but I'm really thinking more along the lines of what do we think we have to absolutely protect? Because if the funding's not going to be there to do all the things that we thought we could do in last year's budget, you know, when we were going through this process last year, we just had a very different economic outlook. And I just think that if we're going to really talk about prioritizing, that maybe a great deal of that conversation needs to be about where's the real core value of the needs in the community, and how will we be able to direct the funds that we do get to really protect those expenses. So anyway, I think I might be looking at it a little bit differently, like I said, this time around than I would have last year. So just kind of leaving it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Chris? You muted, Chris. You're still on mute, Chris.
There it is. Sorry, broken computer. You know, to the point that Cameron just made, I think that it doesn't read the way we might think it reads. And I guess from the communications work we do, I think we should take any of these documents we develop and shop them out to third parties who are fresh on the topic and don't see it how we see it, because I had clear messaging from the public that told us that this is our first priority. And that's how it looks. And so we need to be cognizant that while we are spending all this time doing all this work, others don't see it the way we do. And that's the challenge of our communication.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I heard that loud and clear as well. Okay, so any other discussion on this? If not, I'm going to go ahead and go with Meg's suggestion, and then Cameron and I will work with Shelley to incorporate this onto the 31st. And then, that'll be the point where we can have the conversation that I know, Crystal and some others have pointed at. Okay, moving right along then. So next we have the assembly member discussion on pending business. So just as a reminder, this is when we're gonna go round table, and I guess I'm just gonna go in the order that I see folks on the participant list. And actually just, I'm gonna read that participant list right now so everyone can prepare. So that's Chris, Forrest, John, Cameron, Crystal, Meg, Austin, Suzanne, and just double checking I didn't miss anyone. Yep. Okay, so that's the order that I see right now. So this is where you're going to just go through and talk about any of your individual work that you're doing as an assembly member. So start with Chris.
At this time, I am clearing my deck of all new projects until we've sorted through the business that we have before us, the CARES Act funding, the alcohol tax proposal, and the legislation that we have in the hopper. I'm feeling overburdened and under capacity at this time. And so that's my report, is I'm putting the brakes on pretty much everything, getting prepared to get through this and through the budget process. Other things will start to emerge, but yeah, hand is on the brake.
Self-care, yes, absolutely. Forrest.
Yeah, I mean, like Chris, most of my time right now is spent in conversations surrounding the CARES Act distribution and the alcohol tax. There are a couple of other things that are coming out. I mean, you and I, Felix, are going to be submitting something related to hotels here shortly that I think we'll be discussing in August, although it might be submitted today. Mr. Weddleton and I are also working on something dealing with municipal right-of-ways, which he could speak to as well if he'd like. That also might hit the addendum today, but then we'll probably go out till late the second meeting in August for public hearing, I believe. But again, he could speak to that more. Actually, is he here? Mr. Weddleton, are you here? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, he's okay. Yeah. So I'll leave that for him then, if he wants to talk about it. Other than that, I don't believe I have anything else directly in the hopper. I'll hop in later if I forgot something. Thank you.
Thanks, Forrest. Next on the list is John.
Okay. I'm off mute. Look at that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
From the CEDC side, and Crystal can add things that I forget. But we still, and of course, like everyone else, gotten a little behind schedule on some things, but still making a list and looking at marijuana law changes. We also will see something very soon on building fee changes that we had done in December last year, kicked in this year, and we'll have some revisions for 2021 that you'll see soon. And I really want to thank Chris Schutte and Bob Dole and Linda, I don't remember her last name, from Building Services, worked on something that is now being passed around by to the home builders and roofers and all these people, and to get their feedback. But it looked really good. I mean, we had some pushback, and they dealt with it very positively. I was really pleased with that. We're also working briskly on conditional uses and a potential license for homeless shelters. And Meg could also discuss that and others. On AMATs, that MTP 2040 should be coming our way in not too long of a time. And I don't know if they discussed it at AMATs yesterday or not. I didn't go to that meeting, but maybe Chris or Meg could show us something on that. But I would expect to see that in front of us in the next 4 to 6 weeks. There is the quasi-judicial rules for running our meetings for the back of the agenda items. And I think the only one really up to date on that is Mandy, and the rest of us are struggling to keep up. But it's been about a year or more that we've been working on that, and we're pretty darn close. Every word has been flipped on its head several times. The builder issues that Forrest discussed, I think he covered them pretty well, and you should see something on the addendum, and we'll push it back as long as needed. I expect that it has one with micro trenching to get more fiber optic around town, which I think we all know is important always, and certainly with COVID and online schooling and so on, it's becoming super critical. There's some issues with kind of just simple driveway things that builders are running into problems with. And then also curb design, which is an interesting thing that we'll be discussing on another AO for the builders, and what threshold we use for contaminated soil. So these will be some interesting issues, and I think we're pushing back the date so Bob Dole and Chris Schutte and so on can have a good look at it. And I would expect an S version. And I don't think there's a huge time issue because building seasons will be wrapping down before we hit it anyway. So it's something we need to do, but it's not hugely in a big rush. Something that's come up too, is what do you do if you have an assessment that is wildly inaccurate and you appeal it, and the Board of Adjustment says it doesn't really look at the appeal, the value. They look at the process. They say, no, the process was done right. But what if the result is absolutely ridiculous? We don't have a clear path for resolving that, even through the appeal process, until you go to court. And that's super expensive for some of these. And it's something I'm starting to look in a little bit more. I don't have a time schedule for that, but it's been a concern for me. So that's for me.
Thanks, John. Cameron?
Yeah, I'm beyond the things we all know we're all working on. Let's see. Well, I'll let I guess Chris and Forrest already went. Continuing to work on the government to government relationship with Eklutna, and that work continues and is progressing really well. And so we continue to have meetings about that, and are excited to eventually bring that forward. Also, I am beginning the work to really look at the process of how we name things in Anchorage, whether that's a park or a building, and have been doing a research and been met with the ombudsman and got all the sort of history of how that all those policies and all of that process was established. And once we get maybe a little bit of room in our lives, would like to begin to develop that with one or two other assembly members who are interested. So I've just been doing my own research to make sure I understand the history really well and how we got to where we are now before we move forward. So just a heads up on that. Let's see. And then just continuing on the Public Safety Committee, want to make sure that I know there are others like Meg and others who are having a lot of conversations around policing and around policies and those pieces. I think that one of the things I would really hope to see is that we would develop a sort of a document that highlights what we've heard from the community, and what those priorities are and how we're going to address those moving forward, whether that's acknowledging things, whether that's looking for policy change, whether that's working to become more transparent, whatever it is, but I'd really love to see a working document on what we're hearing and what we know, and so that when we're having meetings at the Public Safety Committee and then others are working in their own work groups, there's at least something that we all can look at in terms of what the larger sort of scope of work is to continue to think about how to improve our policing in Anchorage. So that's just an ask. And Crystal and I are planning on having a planning meeting soon to talk about our next public safety meeting, and I know Meg's very engaged in this as well. So I just want to share that. And if there are any questions or comments on that, I'd love to hear it. Thanks.
Thanks. Next, I have Crystal.
Thanks, Felix. I guess I just want to add a little bit to John's comments about what the CEDC committee has really been working on. And one of those things has been trying to update or revise some of the marijuana licensing processes. And we have a working group that's been a little bit sidetracked now with, it just seems like you start working on something and then some bigger priority jumps in and kind of circumvents all that work. So anyway, but that group, I think, I want to keep plugging along on that. We have some relatively simple things that I think can be done to improve the process. And we just need to kind of throw some of those things out. I think we were trying to come up with some kind of a big omnibus bill on that. And I don't think we're going to, I think it would probably serve us better to do a couple of small things that are easier and get those done. But anyway, so just know that that's still kind of a work in progress. And then the other thing, this kind of goes along with Cameron's comments in regard to naming panels and figuring out a better process for how we name things. And part of that is the street renaming process. And one of the things that I think is missing in what we have in code right now is notification to the community council of the street area. So I'm working on that. Seems to be a relatively easy fix, but I know talked a little bit about it this morning again with Chris Schutte. And so anyway, that's kind of a simple thing, but right now there's enough things to catch up on for me, having been, down in Florida for the past 10 days. I'm still feeling like I'm trying to catch up with all the other big ticket items like CARES funding. And anyway, so that's about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Crystal. Meg?
Thanks, Felix. So yeah, at AMAT yesterday, we did talk about the MTP being finalized. And so the long range transportation plan, I believe, will be headed our way in the coming time. So just kind of keep that on your radar. I'm working on with Felix a resolution and a conversation with the prosecutor's office about competency restoration for misdemeanors. I don't know if you all saw in the paper, but a gentleman was held in in jail awaiting competency restoration for a misdemeanor for a year, which would have been the maximum sentence he could have gotten and was ordered released. So I want us to talk with the prosecutor's office and then hopefully have a discussion about how we can ensure that doesn't happen in the municipality. Shelter licensing, of course, is on my plate. And Mr. Constance, I'm not sure if Cameron is still wanting to jump in on that or not, but I know he's got a lot on his plate, particularly around APD. And we had put it on pause for a while, but we're trying to get things together so that we can have another subcommittee meeting in early August. And then on the APD stuff, as you all know, there's a current ordinance forward by me. And I guess I appreciate process and having a process laid out, but I'm still struggling with process, working through processes, and then the urgency for, action. And I think, with regard to CARES Act, we've found a bit of a balance there. And I'm getting better at compromising, but that same tension for me really exists. So I just wanted to highlight that in that work as well. And I think those are the primary things on my plate for right now. I feel a lot like Forrest and Chris, that we've got to kind of clear the deck of some of these items so that we can then get back to some others that I had mentioned previously. Thanks.
Thanks, Meg. Austin?
Felix, same story as everyone else. CARES Act, alcohol tax, the recent testimony and how busy it kept us. Also working with Felix in the clerk's office on various leadership things. We spend at least a few hours a week, and Felix far more working on that stuff. I was wondering if we're having a APD policies, the proposal you brought forward, Meg, if we're having a work session on that, or will the public hearing and vote presumably happen on Tuesday without one?
Thanks for that question, Austin. It is actually going, it's set out for the 11th, and it's going to the Public Safety Committee on the 5th. And Cameron, Crystal, and I are working on those details now.
Awesome. Thanks. I had a constituent and was just curious. Chris, Constance, and I are both interested in renewable energy credits, and Chris, Schutte, and Shayna are mostly working on that, and then we're going to join in a little bit later. And I think Cameron will join us, but if he's free, Bill and Mark and I think are all free to meet next week to talk about sort of the continuing puzzle of AWU and how we fund septic or sewer. And I agree with Cameron's point about having a document that sort of lists or highlights all of the efforts that we're working on collectively surrounding policing. It's really hard to keep track, and the Open Meetings Act makes it really difficult to talk openly about what everyone's working on. And I just try to remember what I've heard, and then when I get people reach out, I try to share that that's what I think is being worked on. But I think it would be really useful to have it all in one place if there's a way we can do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Austin. Suzanne?
Okay, so first off, my goal is to get caught up on the many constituent communications that have arrived in the last couple weeks during our extra meetings. We've got traffic and noise issues that I'm hoping to get to over the weekend. And also, Chris and I have an AO that would add e-cigs and vaping devices right to the definition of other tobacco products so that they can be taxed under the current tobacco excise tax. And I know we've talked about this in previous Rules Committee meetings, and that is expected to be introduced August 11th. And finally, Chris and Meg and I have a resolution concerning the Stormwater Utility Phase 2 and the Advisory Commission and contract award that, while it may not make it on the addendum for the meeting on the 28th, hopefully it'll be something that can be laid on the table. And there are other things too going on, but my big focus in the next few days will be to try to get caught up on a number of constituent issues.
Mr. Chair, if I might, Felix, just one note, what Suzanne just mentioned is that the item is actually sent off to agenda staff through Dean, but Dean is backed up. And so it is in before noon, but there's just not an opportunity for it to get processed probably before noon. So I just want to clarify a little bit that it's not that we're still working on it, it's done, it just needs to be filtered through the system, and that might put it on our addendum or laid on the table.
Thanks, Chris. I know that was
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Chris. All right. So my list of things, I mean, you all know most of what I'm working on through the Assembly Chair's report. And then we're going to talk about we're going to do a CARES Act follow-up and other items. So I'll talk a little bit about that there. So I hosted, and I guess by I hosted, I mean, I hosted one and then my aide hosted the second one, 2 follow-up sessions in the last week on the initial community conversation on race, which was held in June with community organizers and community groups. And although there is no consensus right now on next steps, which is why you guys haven't gotten an email from me in a while on that one, plus, everything else going on. I imagine that will happen soon, and I'll share more with the members when I get there. As most know, there are already a lot of conversations happening virtually and in other spaces by various community groups, and I hope members are able to attend those as they are able. And then second thing is big thanks to the members who signed the letter to Senate President Kathy Giesel regarding the eviction moratorium and going back into session. So far, I have not received a response from the Senate President. To that end, my aide crafted a resolution, which will, I was hoping to get it added to the addendum, but it looks like it won't. It looks like it'll be added as a late on the table item. That incorporates the various recommendations made by the National League of Cities regarding measures cities can take on evictions, which was sent to everyone via email earlier this week. I've talked with United Way, and if approved on Tuesday, they are ready to work with me to move on the various recommendations. Forrest already talked about the ordinance that the 2 of us are working on regarding right of recall and worker retention. That ordinance is set for a public hearing and vote on August 25th, and I imagine that we will, well, it will be when it's added to the agenda. And I imagine we will have a work session between now and the 25th on that item, and we will invite the various hotels to attend. So those are the 3 items that I had separate from everything else. So before we have a little bit of time, so I do want to open it up before we move on to the other items if folks wanted to follow up on something that another member stated. Before I do that, though, just a note on the naming panels, that is under other items. So if you have a follow-up on that or what Crystal had talked about regarding the streets, let's leave it for that on other items. But otherwise, happy to entertain any discussion on what members have brought up so far. Meg?
Could we talk now about, instead of adding it at the end, I think we're seeing via email, the laid on the table and just capacity. So I had an item, and Dean is just swamped, and I even did the drafting, but it's 12 o'clock. And I don't think it's going to make the addendum. And I've seen like that for a couple other items. So I guess I just want to acknowledge that while we have the laid on the table ordinance, and that's great, and I think we've all been doing a really great job, we're running up against this capacity issue. So I just kind of wanted to highlight it and put it in the discussion as to laid on the table items, and see if anyone had any feedback or thoughts or what we might be able to do to resolve this.
And sorry, could you, so just to better define the question, is the issue around you don't want your items to be laid on the table, you'd rather they get on the addendum?
Yes, because they were pretty much ready to go, and it's just a matter of staff capacity to get them finalized and in. But if they are laid on the table for that reason, I guess I'd like to have a conversation about what's the general feeling about that, if we've really been extremely diligent and we didn't wait till the last minute. Yeah, that's that. I guess that's kind of the question, or again, another tension that I'm observing and a little frustrated with.
Sure. So I have 2 folks in the queue, and then, yeah, I'll go ahead and put myself in the queue as well. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. At the last meeting, it became apparent that we've kind of created this additional workflow for ourselves that's not insubstantial. And with the expressed reason why, of course, is to stop people from trying to get things laid on the table, which rarely is the case, that people try to, but we run up against the barrier of time. And I have some philosophical questions about the overall policy, but it's a policy we've adopted. And I mentioned to the chair at the last meeting, one workaround that I think we need to address is, as absurd as this is, it's a second consent agenda. And that's the consent agenda to get things on the agenda that are laid on the table that we all agree on, so we don't have to have individual votes on 7 different items that we're all going to vote yes on. And so my recommendation, and I know Felix said they're discussing this and some other methods to streamline that process, is that we do that. We just, for any items that are laid on the table that no one has a beef with, we just do them on a single vote so that we can stop having 7 to 10 votes individually when they're all affirmative yeses. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Alex?
I was only going to mention that, obviously everybody is constrained in terms of resources, including staff, and that's why, I got this note from Meg this morning at 9:30 and didn't have a chance to turn it around and process all the corrections. That just as a reminder that when we're going to use CARES funds, we really want to make sure we've gone through a checklist to know that we've followed the federal procurement process correctly, and so that you don't put something before you that predicates us doing things that we may not be able to do. So I just want to make sure we kind of have a process put up in place right now at the administration for how we're running CARES related contracts and things like that. And so I guess I would just suggest that when you have an idea for that, if you can give us, more time to look at it, to see how it fits into everything in our process, then we can be more responsive.
Thanks, Alex. So I'm next in the queue. So just a couple quick comments. So first is, so for me, the way that I see how we should be using laid on the table items, or at least, when we take the vote on whether to add something to the agenda, it shouldn't be political, right? It should be, does this follow the criteria, which is timeliness, and I forget the other ones, but the set of criteria that is laid out in policy. And if you disagree with something that's on the laid on the table agenda, then you can vote no on it after it's added onto the agenda. But really the first question we have is it something that needs to be on the agenda in a timely manner or not? And I think for the most part, we're pretty good at that. But I also realize, the natural tension of limitations of staff and our time, and there's only 24 hours in a day. And I can tell you that last night and this morning, I was emailing back and forth with Dean at 1:30 a.m. and at 6:30 a.m. So we're working our tails off, and we all know that. I think the second thing is, I'd love to explore the idea more of the second consent agenda. I'll be honest, right? We talked about that. Austin, Barbara, and I, and the rest of the clerk's office talked about the different ideas, and we talked about second consent agenda versus doing it one-on-one. And I'm going to let Austin really lead that part of the discussion, since this was her ordinance. And in the end, the decision that leadership made was the one-on-one. But maybe we can look at other decisions and other avenues to make this work. And with that, I'll turn it over to Austin.
Thanks, Felix. I totally understand the frustration and the tension, and I think long term we probably need more capacity, and we probably specifically need more legal capacity. I think Dean, we all work too much. Dean works far too much, would lump Felix in that category. And I just don't see how it's sustainable. So I would really like, maybe with CARES Act with COVID and everything going on, it's hard to know when the right time is. But I think we just can't keep on like this. And, with that, if we have more legal capacity and Dean's doing more work, and if we had more clerk's office capacity and they're doing more work, that means we're all going to do more work. Because as you guys know, if a member comes up with an idea, then we're involved in it, whether it's just merely reading it or attending a work session or having a longer meeting or whatever the time constraints are. So I think I understand individual members' desires to move their things quickly. And I've been in that boat myself, but I also think it is a strain on other members and on other staff. And so when I think about whether something's urgent, I really try to take that into account. And I hope that other members do too. And, the idea of a consent agenda, I think that's completely against what the ordinance was about. And my vision, and it might not have been everyone's, with the ordinance was to, I don't want to show up at 4:45 and have 8 documents I haven't read and be asked to approve them on the consent agenda or on, in any agenda without having time to process them. I think that's bad policy. Even if the thing is completely legit, it's really bad if we don't have time to really process them and ask questions and get questions answered and think about it. And I think it's just bad process. And I think it's disrespectful to the public to show up and vote on things that we don't have time to process. So the reason that we're doing one by one is to make members really articulate why it meets the requirements of the code. And if you just put it on a consent agenda thinking no one no one minds, but there's still more work involved in that, more work in the clerk's office over the weekend, more work with Dean over the weekend, more work for members to try to review it in 3 minutes. And that's problematic. So I think it's no one's fault. I mean, the bottom line is that we just have more work we want to do than time. And I think long-term, we're going to have to fix that. But in the meantime, I would be opposed to any sort of consent agenda to add things last minute.
Thanks. Chris?
Then I look forward to having that debate among the members, because it isn't fair that items are submitted by the deadline, but they don't get in or even are ready to go the night before, but we're told, I'm sorry, 4 other items came up and it's the items of the chair and the vice chair that are in front. That's not right. And so for my part, I want to make sure that if we are told we have a noon deadline and we get it over by noon, that it's in. If it's not because everybody else is busy, it's not fair to our priorities. And so while it might be appearing to be disrespectful to the public for trying to get the work done in a timely manner, but being unable to because of the limitations of resources, I think that we have to figure out a path that works to get those items on the table.
Thanks, Chris. Crystal?
Thanks, Felix. I'm just mulling this over too. I mean, I understand when there are times when something really is urgent and you probably don't have much of a choice, but boy, at the same time, Austin's absolutely right. We get blasted a lot about doing things too quickly. The public doesn't have a chance to weigh in. They don't really know what's going on. And yeah, there are times as an assembly member when I feel like, what is this? Where did this come from? And there's just way too many things like that probably do happen. And maybe it's because there are 11 of us. Maybe it's because this is a very large municipality. Maybe it's because we have kind of this perfect storm of all kinds of events going on that make this more difficult. But I really do hesitate thinking that we would just quickly run through some of these things. I think it is bad public process as well. So we have to be able to figure out how to balance that. So anyway, that's my thought. Thanks.
Thank you. Austin?
Thanks, Felix. I just quickly, Chris said something about the vice chair and chair's items going first, and there's nothing factually correct there. And so I just want to clarify, this is not a way for Felix and I to drive our last minute policies. It's a way to be respectful to the public.
Thanks. And yeah, I actually just wanted to ask Chris to clarify what he meant, because I will say from my perspective. Hold on, Chris. Let me talk, please. I will say from my perspective that it came off very disrespectful, but I want to ask Chris to clarify.
Yeah, it wasn't based on any evidence, but it was based on the fact that 3 items that were submitted in this agenda on time, I was told they're behind other people's priorities, and those priorities just came up. And so I don't have any idea how priorities are then made, how they're established, who gets to set what on the agenda where, other than I'm not involved in those conversations. And so there are only a few people on the body who actually are. And so in some ways, whether it's the fact or not, you have a responsibility. And so, yes, it wasn't intended to mean that you specifically have done any of that. It just is, we're in a position now where the workflow priorities are happening, order is being met, and we're still finding ourselves in a position where we're told, I'm sorry, no. So then we're going to get to go through an extra 10 to 15 minutes at our meeting on Tuesday to get these items on the table one at a time. And it's a process problem.
Thanks. Meg, just really quick, want to comment. As I hope everyone heard, when I went through my individual stuff, that I said one of the items that I was working on didn't end up getting on the addendum, and that it's going to be laid on the table. So, yeah. So I will also say that, and I'm sorry to put Dean on the spot, but maybe after Meg goes, I do want to put Dean on the spot so that he can talk about this, because this is a discussion that I have had with Dean, but I've also realized that I should not abuse my power as chair to influence this. Dean, if I did try to do that, Dean would push back against me, and I have full faith that he would. So I'm going to go to Meg, and then Dean, just get ready.
Thanks, Felix. So the only item I've ever tried to lay on the table under this new provision that didn't go, and then I didn't move it generally. So if you lay an item on the table and it doesn't make it, then you just go back and resubmit it for the next agenda? Or is there a way to have it automatically go into the next regular agenda so that it doesn't get, quite frankly, lost in the shuffle of all the busyness of a meeting, and then you go and you dig out from a meeting, or at least I do, the next day, and try to make sure I've captured everything that occurred. So that's my process question: is does it? I know it doesn't automatically go in, but I guess that's the question. Could it automatically go in if it doesn't make it through the laid on the table process?
And sorry, could you ask that question one more time, Meg, just so I can capture it?
Sure. I'm sorry, it wasn't terribly articulate the first go. So the question is, if you lay an item on the table and it does not get the votes to go into the agenda at that meeting, can we have a process by which that item can automatically go into the next meeting's agenda if that's what the member wants? That's the question.
Got it. I think maybe I'll ask Dean to address that too. So Dean, if you want to address both my comments and question, and then Meg's as well. I can't hear you, Dean. Dean, you're on mute. Okay, I think I'm going to go to Suzanne, and hopefully Dean will be back with us. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. My question is, what is involved?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Oh, go ahead. If you're okay, Suzanne, go ahead, Dean.
I'll wait.
Yes, I'm sorry. I missed what the question was for me. I'm sort of multitasking here.
Yeah, go ahead, Dean. The floor is yours.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what I'm being asked to talk about.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll try to encapsulate both of the comments and questions. So my comment and question was just basically around, prior discussions that I've had with you about how you prioritize your time and, what you work on, how you make those decisions. And I just made a comment that I in no way attempt to influence that, because that would be inappropriate for me, and Dean would push back if I did. The second question was from Meg, and that was a process around if a late on the table item fails to get added onto the agenda, can it automatically go into the regular agenda for the next meeting?
Well, I guess that's more of a clerk's office question. You can send an item anytime to the assembly agenda email address, and then how they process it there, I would leave to Barbara to answer. Often, though, I work on something I like things to be perfect before we send them in, so we often come to a point where we're going back and forth, that we're busy during the week, and then not just me, I think, but all of us on Thursday night try to finish and send it in Friday. So we just sort of reach a bottleneck on each Friday deadline. And some are busier or more serious bottlenecks than others. At that point, things get a little rushed. So I find that with my time, that I've been attending a lot more meetings the past year on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And so sometimes Monday, Tuesday, I don't have answers I need. Then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's busy just with all these meetings we've been having, and plus all the things to keep up with the COVID-19. So I think these past couple months have been especially hard to keep pace with everything. But I maybe could respond better later. I actually have 2 things I need to finish. So that's why I haven't been paying close attention to the meeting today.
Fair enough, Dean. And I think, this is a prime example of how overworked Dean is. And I wish we had Kate here so that she could talk about the Department of Law and how they can help. But maybe that's just a conversation for later. Barbara, did you want to address Meg's question?
Absolutely. That is a very simple procedure that we can implement. If anything was not added as a late on the table item, we could just automatically submit it for the next agenda. It would be slightly more difficult if it's in Dean's queue. I think Dean would have to say what would do with those. But if it's something that gets before the body votes it down, the clerk's office absolutely can make that on the next agenda.
Thanks, Barbara. Always providing solutions. I really appreciate it. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. I agree with what's been said about the need for a balance, and that especially during this time with all these issues going on, we don't want regular business items to get lost. And it's very clear that, as it's been pointed out, and I think Dean's response shows, there's a need for more resources for him. So my question is, what is the format and preparation behind the scenes that's required for submitting resolutions and AOs? And is there anything we can do, like on our side, maybe working with our aides to prepare documents that are more closer to being ready for submitted? I don't really know what all is involved once we send something, to the clerk's office or to Dean. And so if that could be addressed real quick, that would help me understand. Thanks.
Oh, well, I think I wouldn't make one other comment before I answer Suzanne's question. And that was, I really hesitate to send things to the clerk's office before I've got some final go ahead from the sponsors, because that makes things a little more difficult when I send and then the sponsors say, no, that's not quite right. So oftentimes, I think what would be helpful is we have, if I can receive a go ahead on Thursday night or earlier, and then we can get things really done Friday. And often you guys are busy Friday morning prepping for the work sessions we usually have. So I think if we could just get like our edits from sponsors for resolution or ordinance done by Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I can clean up. And Thursday, get a thumbs up. Friday would be much easier. And of course, we would still have some once in a while Friday morning that need to go. There's always a few last minute things, but for those that we've been working on a while, I think a little earlier time frame for getting edits from sponsors and then a thumbs up for sending into the agenda would be really helpful. And then for Suzanne's question, to help prep more, I think using the templates, and I think I've sent the AR, AO, and AM templates to some members. If you don't have them, I should probably send you them all. If you can start writing your stuff within the templates and then send them, that saves a bit of formatting time on my end. And actually, if I had in my assistant position field, and I'm sorry I've taken so long to get that done, but when I have an assistant position field, that would really speed things up for me because I have to do a lot of that formatting work. That saves me a bit of time to focus on more substantive editing. So anyways, I promise I'm going to get on that and fill that position.
Thanks, Dean. Did you have any follow-up, Suzanne? And I do want to go to Dee and then Alex to ask some process stuff with them.
I'm good, Felix. Thanks.
Thanks. So then I guess I'll turn to Dee. So first on the comment that you made regarding Friday morning work sessions, I will say that for my part, I usually try to fill the afternoon first and then the morning, but I heard pretty loud and clear from assembly members that during the summer that they would prefer if we do mornings first and then afternoons, just because assembly members want to, and staff too, want to enjoy their Friday afternoons during the summer. So yeah, there's a little bit of natural tension there, and I appreciate that. But so I guess two things, Dee, if you want to address that, the comment that I just made, and then second, what does the process look like for the cooperative relationship that you and Dean have? If Dean's getting so overwhelmed, how can you help out, Dee?
Okay, this is Dee. I think both sides, administration and assembly, are over capacity, and that may just be the time of these the sign of these times. But we're both over capacity. The having work sessions and all the deadlines on Friday is a real problem. Dean and all of the administration PACE people are rushing. We're doing 3 to 4 things at one time. So we need to solve that problem one way or the other. In old days, it used to be assembly only did work sessions on Fridays. Now it's been extended through other times. So we just have to figure out those deadlines and deal with them directly. Dean and the Department of Law are always exchanging documents. We're always helping each other. If there's a last minute, we try to share that. Sometimes these documents are not to be shared with the administration, but more often they're not getting to Dean sometimes till late Thursday night or to the point where he feels comfortable sending them to us. He sends sub-issues to us all the time. A question, do you think we can do this? Do you think we can do that? But that's that Monday, Tuesday looking at things. So there really isn't actually a lot of assistance both ways, but we're both over capacity, I think, at this point in time. But the deadlines on Friday, including mayor press conferences, is just killing all of us. And that's a huge problem. It's a systemic problem which we should be able to solve.
Thanks. I think one of the things I'm hearing is that maybe we just need to have a subsidiary deadline to the noon agenda, where you know I think it should be pretty obvious to us now. If we send stuff to Dean on Thursday, even if it's maybe in sort of final kind of format, it might not get done for a variety of different reasons. And I'm actually going to have Alex talk about the funding issues that pop up and what's sort of the time frame that takes. So yeah, this is a good discussion. It makes me think that maybe we need to have a second kind of deadline we impose on ourselves. Alex?
Certainly, thank you, Felix. So the one point which I think was even highlighted when you passed the initial 21.5 million CARES package was the addition of 1.5 million to that, where Dean very specifically asked me to affirm that, in fact, those funds were available. And obviously, in relation to the CARES Act, where we have 156 million, yes, 1.5 million is available. It gets much more, but the timing issue is such that we have the controller's office that actually is looking at each item that comes before you. Is there money in those specific funds to pay for those specific projects, those contracts, et cetera? So that is not a quick process. I think what you're seeing here in terms of workload is something that the administration works with day in, day out. I think you've all heard the story that as we've added over 100 police officers over the last 4 years, those have person by person been met with cuts of 100 people to administration staff. So I would agree with your comment that if you're trying to meet the noon deadlines, be it for the regular agenda or the addendum, you would be most helpful if that came to the administration probably by Wednesday, because it has to go through legal, it has to go through budget, it has to go through the controller. So that process you're suggesting makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Bill, do you want to go ahead and, even though it's off topic, I think it might be fun.
Oh, sorry, I just put it in the chat, off topic, but I believe we have approved the last PACE item in history. I can't swear that the numbering began with number 1, but I believe it did, and it ended with number 20,565. Joy says she's been using PACE for 15 years, so it's the end of an era. Let's figure out some kind of retirement ceremony for the system.
That's great. We could use some type of ceremony right now, some type of celebration. Okay, thanks so much, Bill. Thanks so much, Alex and Dee. I'm going to go ahead and close this conversation. It's been good. I think we need to mull these things over, and then maybe we can have this conversation at some other forum, whether it's next month's regular rules committee meeting or sooner than that. Oh, sorry, I'm not looking at hands. Barbara, did you want to talk?
No, Mr. Chair. I was just going to comment about the templates that Dean mentioned and remind members that you can use CAMP to get to those templates. And when the templates and the documents are complete, it's going to be faster.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think we should all probably, actually, I'm curious, Barbara, can you just email us those templates? Is that something that you could do?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. And I will also offer that if anyone wants a one-on-one, you can just give me a call, but I'm going to go with what the chair said earlier, not on a Friday afternoon in the summer.
Thanks. Okay, so with that, I'm going to move us on and appreciate all of the discussion. So next, I'm actually going to switch up the other, well, actually, sorry. So what I'm going to do for the next regular rules committee meeting, and Barbara, I hope you can take note of this. I'm gonna just combine items C and D because it feels like we're naturally doing that anyway. But I'm gonna go ahead and just go through the participant list one more time to see if anyone has quick additions to any committee business that they didn't talk about already. And then when we get to other items, I'm going to prioritize the CARES Act follow-up and the public hearing other item. And then I don't think we're going to have time for more than that. So let me just go through Forrest, any committee business? Actually, sorry. John, you already talked about committee business. Cameron, any additional committee business? Cameron? Okay, I'm gonna assume he's busy. Crystal, you already talked about this, but do you have anything else?
No, thanks, Felix. Nothing else.
Got it. Meg, anything on committee business?
I just want to put an invitation out to members now that we've made it through our alcohol tax discussions, and we will be talking about shelter licensing, but maybe when it's further along, because CEDC has a subcommittee. If you have topics or something you want to hear about now that we've started this deep dive, let me know. If there's providers or any portion or anything around homelessness you guys want to dive into deep on, I'm game.
Thanks, Meg. Austin, any other committee business?
No, thanks, Felix.
Thanks. Suzanne, any other committee business?
Nothing to add. Thanks, Felix.
Thanks. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move us to other items. So first is CARES Act follow-up, which I'm calling COVID-19 relief follow-up now. So to follow up on the email that was sent out earlier this week to the members, I received a draft scope of work late last night, right? Talking about all the late nights we're having from Northwest Strategies, and an appropriation resolution. Gosh, sorry, I'm going to be talking about some touchy subjects, but an appropriation resolution with an amount unknown at this point will be laid on the table on Tuesday, which seeks to use a very small portion of the COVID-19 relief funds to do the work of communications and outreach that we talked about on July 17th, so that we can engage the community in the work we are doing and get their feedback. I'll make all of the required justifications for adding the item to the agenda and hope I get support, but that'll be the vote. Moving on, next week on Monday or Tuesday, Cameron and I will meet with Shelley to finalize the agenda for the July 31st meeting, like I mentioned earlier. But members, per the email that was sent out earlier this week, should already know their pre-work that needs to get done before the 31st. So that's the only things I had. Any discussion on that? Meg?
Thanks, Felix. So I have a CARES Act follow-up that I think our two items might overlap regarding capacity for the assembly, which does include some communication. So I wanted to flag that. I don't know if they fully overlap, and mine will be laid on the table as well. So anyway, I just want to flag it as those things move through. Once it's fully formatted, I will ask for it to be distributed, even though it'll be laid on the table as soon as possible. But those two items might actually be repetitive.
Okay. Barbara, can you do me a favor and can you just put Meg and I in an email so that we can sort that out? Forrest?
Yeah, you referenced July 31st as a meeting. Is it a meeting or is it a work session?
Yeah, I guess understanding the parsing of those words. So it's going to be similar to the meeting that we had on the 17th, which was basically a work session.
Yeah, it was. So what's the exact time on that?
Yeah, so that's going to be, it's imagining basically to be the same time length, but we might not use the entire time. So 9 to 5.
9 to 5. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, Barbara should be getting a holdout to you all ASAP. Like I said, emailed her earlier today about it. Okay. Any other discussion on the COVID-19 relief? All right. I think the process is going pretty well. I'm happy with it. Next is public hearing. Gosh, so sorry, another touchy subject. So simple question that I want to pose to the body for discussion. Before I state the question, I want to clarify that this question isn't about the process of developing ordinances before they get on an assembly agenda. That's a totally different conversation we can have at another time if the body would like. So the question is simply this: when members like to explore or engage, and I'm hoping Cameron's back on, when members like to explore or engage in a conversation about reimagining what our public hearings could look like, or what some type of alternative processes might look like. I'm posing the question, myself, without any direct opinion. It's just a question that I'm posing to the body. Austin.
Thanks, Felix. Tell me if I'm off base here and I'll let someone else go. But I've just been thinking a lot about this hearing, the 2020-66, particularly, and how little information we were able to get to the public before the public testimony. Is that kind of along the lines of what you're talking about?
Yeah, so for me, I think that's a slightly different discussion of how we get information to the public before stuff gets on the agenda.
Okay.
My question is specific to the public hearing process, and do we want to reimagine how that might look different after items get added onto the agenda?
Okay. I don't think I totally get it. I'll let John weigh in on that. Just quickly finish my thought about the public hearing piece on controversial items. It seems like a lot of the public feedback was that, well, some folks said in emails, it doesn't seem like you're listening, you're not asking a lot of questions. Of course, many of us know that it's not necessarily our time to ask a bunch of questions, we're there to listen. But I think because there was a lack of a framework for that, for people who weren't used to testifying in front of us, or many of them, I think, I don't know, just been thinking through it. Could we have had the administration give a presentation for 5 to 10 minutes before we started it? Could we have the administration have poster boards with information about the project? It just felt like we weren't doing a good job of communicating to the public. So anyway, that we can talk about that later, but just food for thought.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge those comments are spot on with the question, which I guess I didn't phrase it well enough. But yes, you're totally right. That's answers that I'm hoping for.
Okay.
John.
Well, thanks. I think Austin hit something there, and it might be several points perhaps in the meeting where the chair states, this is a public hearing, this is our time to listen to you. We often will be taking notes here, whatever. Doesn't mean lack of interest when we don't ask you questions. That's not really what we're here for or something. I think Cameron had better wording though, when he referred to, I think, what they do at the school board. But that would be helpful. We had hundreds of people who just didn't know the process. And I'd also say one thing that I guess I should never say never, but I will never move to combine a public hearing again. That was a mess, given 6 minutes plus questions to 10 or 12 for many people. But I went last year, traveled a bunch, and went to city councils in places where I went and watched how they did it. And all I knew was everyone gets 3 minutes, and I guess I figured that was true everywhere. The way people do it is broad. I don't remember if it was the LA County or LA city council, but they gave people 3 minutes total for the entire meeting. So if you got 3 topics, you could do a minute on each. If you got 1, you could do 3 minutes, which I think would be hard to get people to accept here. But other places, they had no limit. When I was in Bozeman, they just kind of let people go. One of the places you had to sign in on a little kiosk, and if you didn't sign in and they moved on, they just moved on. So if we reimagine this, we can reimagine very broadly. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm hearing is yes and yes, that we want to engage in this conversation, and some great ideas that we can explore later. Meg?
Thanks, Felix. Yeah, as we engage in this conversation, which I think it's necessary, we are also looking at the Assembly Ambassador or Navigators Plan or program. Should we be back live in chambers again soon? So I want to make sure that we consider how those two things or any changes would work together.
Thanks. Good point. Any other discussion on this? I'm going to assume that Cameron is busy. Otherwise, I'm sure he would be in the queue right now, jumping on it. Okay, then I'll go ahead and move on. So the motion to postpone item, just to quickly get that out of the way, this was an old request by a member which has been rescinded. So we're going to go ahead and move on, and you won't see that one unless a member decides to talk about it in the future. So let's do follow up on naming panels. And so I guess Cameron made some succinct points during his report when we did roundtable for individual assembly member items. I guess for me, I would like to know who is or wants to work with Cameron on this process. And then if you had any other thoughts that you wanted to put out into the ether about naming panels. So any discussion on that?
I'm interested, Felix. I let Cameron know that.
Great.
I recall, maybe you can remind me, but I feel like a few months ago we started talking about this, and there were a lot of people who had interest, and then we thought, well, maybe we just do a more public, more than 3-person thing. But I guess it just totally depends on how many people are interested. But just throw that out there that I think we had that discussion at some point.
Yes, and sorry I didn't frame this using that. So yeah, so this is a follow-up on that prior discussion that we had. And Austin is correct, right? We had talked about, but we didn't really come to an agreement. At least I didn't hear an agreement on how exactly we wanted to move forward on this.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm hoping maybe today we could at least move in that direction of how we wanted to move forward on this discussion.
Felix, this is Crystal. I think
Yeah.
I volunteered to be part of that group too.
Felix, I'm sorry, I had to step away. Are we talking about naming panels?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry.
You're talking about Cameron, the process. Like if there are more people than 3, should we do it in a more like larger group setting? Should we try to keep it small? Just kind of brainstorming. We hadn't really started except for Crystal mentioned that she wanted to be part of it as well.
Okay. Well, if it's I don't know if there are people in the queue, but you can put me in the queue.
I don't have anyone, but I guess just to preface what I had said earlier. So this is a follow-up to the conversation we had several months ago, and in that conversation we had talked a little bit about what the process might look like for us to talk about naming panels and redoing this process. We didn't really, at least for my part, I didn't hear an alignment on the process. I heard sort of good ideas, but not clear action steps forward. So I wanted to do this follow-up so that we could talk about the process and then if there are any clear action steps. So, with that, go ahead, Cameron.
Oh, thanks. So I don't, I mean, I've heard a few people speak about it, and I think there's not completely clear alignment in terms of the intention or the desire of people. They seem to be somewhat similar. And I guess my suggestion, just because I think it's going to require, like any of these issues, a fair amount of learning and research about kind of what exists now, and then thinking about bringing people in and having conversations about what it could be and changes and that sort of thing. And so I would just suggest that it start out as a small group, and that with people who are interested in doing that work, and then bringing it to the larger group at some point for a work session or something like that. I would just say that I think that, but what I've heard from a few others are that they have specific concerns based on what they've heard from their constituents, and that they think the process, may need to be tweaked or changed. I will just share, and I think I've been pretty clear about this, that this is an area where the conversations we've been having about systemic problems is just abundantly clear. That this is when you read how this process was developed, and the language in it, it clearly is discriminatory and not a fair process, and not a good process for how it's done. And so my interest is both in addressing some of those sort of system challenges and policy challenges and process challenges, and really rethinking how we do it, but then also coming forward with something that is more aligned to, as I've said in the past, more aligned to kind of where we want our city to go and be. And so that's my suggestion. My suggestion is that if there's a couple of other people, I'd really like to be involved too. That I would suggest we start out with 3, just because I think it's going to be easier to do with the groundwork. But if there's strong feeling from others, then we can certainly develop a larger process. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Cameron. And yeah, I guess, to assist in this process, it would be helpful to know who are the folks who really feel passionate that they need to be one of those 3. Also realizing there are a lot of us who are interested in this and who maybe have different time restraints. Also want to note that I've heard 3 people already who've expressed interest: Crystal, Austin, and Cameron. There are probably more in the queue right now. So, John. You're muted, John.
Sorry about that. I'm interested in seeing what other people come up with. We just had a conversation about how busy we are, and everybody can sort of set their own schedules, of course. But, we do have, the 1% for art curator is not specifically this issue, but we have a couple other commissions. There's people in our government who I think could be tasked with this. If an outline were prepared and said, hey, here's our goals. And I think Cameron expresses them extremely well, and pass it off to these groups and say, come up with something, and then deal with it as the assembly. That might be a way to get things maybe moving faster and not continue to overload us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. Forrest?
Yeah, that's a great idea by John just now. If there is some other group that we logically could think of that would be willing to do some of the initial legwork, sort of similar to how the animal, this is a little bit different, but like the Animal Control Commission or board does a lot of like really in-depth work before it ever really makes it to us. And there are some of those commissions that are very active, that dig into different issues. I think the Water Control Quality Board does that too. But yeah, I mean, if there is an appropriate commission that could work on this, I think that would be great. I have long felt that this is sort of something the administration needs to lead, and this is not at all an indictment of the current administration, who's very very busy right now. But it's something that, for example, with when we did go through a similar process with the seal, the municipal seal that Mr. Dyson had really wanted to go through, and we passed it, and then it didn't really happen, and there were a variety of reasons for that. But if there is an effort, I would love to be a part of it, but I recognize that we already have more than 3 people. This is something I really care about, and I think it dovetails very much with things that I believe in terms of creating a sense of Indigenous place in Anchorage, and also the work we're doing with the Klutna. I might have another outlet later in the year where I'm going to be talking about these kind of things, and I would love if that dovetails with what we're doing on the assembly too. Yeah, I mean, I am passionate about this. I guess I say that but I'm also happy to step back and out of the way if we need just 3 people to be doing this. I don't have to be one of those 3, although I do care about it a lot.
Thanks, Forrest. So I'm next in the queue. Yeah, I really like John's idea, and actually a couple members know this already, but yesterday I read an article about the Portland City Council, and they made their CARES Act decision with, I think it was $114 million. And what they did was they set up a task force of their residents to help them make inform their decisions. And so, I think I say this also understanding that assembly members can be sort of a part of that process, but I sort of like the idea, especially when we're talking about public naming panels, naming public things, incorporating the ideas of members of our community in how we could reimagine this, and sort of putting this in, for lack of a better word, their hands to help make these decisions. With that, I'll turn it over to Austin.
Thanks, Felix. I was just going to agree, I guess, with everything everyone said. I really like John's idea. And I think, to Forrest's point, perhaps if there's an appropriate group or organization or commission or whatever it is that could work through it, then maybe they could bring it back to a larger group and have it publicly noticed, so that I don't think anyone needs to feel left out from that process, particularly if we're not all working on it from the beginning. So I like John's idea a lot.
Thanks. So I think, unfortunately, we're out of time, because I do want to go to need to go to audience participation. But maybe we can come back to this after people mull it over, and then I do want to get to hopefully a decision point sometime soon, at least on sort of some concrete next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to audience participation. Unfortunately, I just see the last 2 digits, but a 70 number. You are not muted, so if you wanted to participate, feel free. Again, opening it up to the 70, the last 2 digits that I can see. Oh, I guess I scared 70 away. They're leaving. Okay, then I guess since we do have 4 minutes, did anyone want to share some? There we go. Cameron, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to make a suggestion so it doesn't stay on our agenda, and that is that Austin, Crystal, and I, obviously there's a lot going on right now, so we'll think about the timeline, that we proceed forward with working on this work, and that we reach out to the folks that John mentioned and, you know, do some sort of pre-work on this. And so I didn't hear any objection to the three of us moving forward and starting to work on it. And I think then coming back to a future rules committee and giving an update on work, and then there can be a decision later on as to whether to expand it or not. So I just want to pose that as an idea, so that it doesn't just get tabled and we have some movement. So
thanks, Cameron. Yeah, good point. And you know, I guess for my part, unless I ask for objection, I don't want to assume that there isn't any. So is there any objection to what Cameron just said? And yes, Barbara is correct. Comment. I'll go ahead and put it in the record that if 3 members are working on a group or subcommittee, your meetings are publicly noticed, which, yeah, I think most of us realize that by now.
Well, and can I ask a question, Felix, or maybe?
Sure, go ahead.
This doesn't seem to me, this isn't a subcommittee. I mean, this is something that people were already working on. So it seems like we could be emailing to coordinate who we might ask outside of a public meeting.
I'll let Barbara weigh in on that. I guess, yeah, I'm not going to offer an opinion. Barbara, go ahead.
If it's procedural, yes, I think procedurally you can have the 3 of you possibly on an email. I think the danger is that the topic itself, public naming, citizen naming panels, could come back before you. And that could be an argument that the setup wasn't publicly noticed. If the group is a subcommittee or a task force or a group of the rules committee, since it was on the rules committee agenda, I'd be conservative and suggest that you notice it.
But I think to Austin's finer point, and I think you answered it, Barbara, which is sort of the process stuff, not necessarily the meat, but okay, let's all get together and meet, and we're going to publicly notice this meeting. That kind of stuff can happen through an email.
Yes.
Felix, can I ask a question? This is Cameron.
Yeah, go ahead.
I realize we're almost out of time. I just want to be really clear about that. I was under the impression that 3 members or fewer could meet on a topic, whatever that topic is, and it not be noticed, but it's when it goes over 3. Is that incorrect?
There's a lot of nuance to that. So,
okay. So I'll take it offline, but that's why it's a surprise to me. I thought the magic number was 3, and if you were at 3, then you're good. So,
and I think Dean may have prepared a memo on it. At least I've asked him to, but it may have gotten dropped. Totally understandable. So if Dean, if you do have a memo on that, can you go ahead and just send that to the members? But otherwise, we can take this offline. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the committee meeting. Thanks, everyone. See you in 10 minutes.